am Rita J. King, founder of Power Pairs. And as we talk about challenges in the business landscape, I thought, isn't reality starting to feel more and more like a reality show? So let's talk to two brothers, the Fio Bros, who actually competed on The Amazing Race. And today we'll talk about what got thrown at them and what they learned from it.
What's up?
Thanks for having us. I love the little transition there with the reality show. Very nice. Very nicely done.
Is starting to feel like a reality show, isn't it? So I thought we could talk a little bit about you and Fio Bros, actual bros, also Brooklyn, like myself. And so that will be the glue that binds. I always remember when you guys brought me a homemade limoncello and a box of cannoli. Known you for a long time. Nick, you and I worked together years ago when you were at a Fortune 100 company, and I was consulting as an advisor with the leadership team. And in the time since then, you have left corporate America to embark on a journey with your brother, Mike, who is also here with us today. And one of the things I love about your work and your attitude in general, which I view as indistinguishable, is your emphasis on empathy, authenticity, happiness. And so in the time since you left corporate America, you've done a lot of things. So, many of which are, all of which I would say, are related to being a human being in this world. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So tell us a bit about yourselves. And I know that you tried for 7 years to get on The Amazing Race. And so you finally got on. And what was that like for you?
Yeah, so I'm Nick. This is Mike.
Actually, before we start, we should get it out of the way since we get this all the time. No, we are not twins.
We are brothers that are 4 years apart. Yep, that's kind of our background there. But in terms of your question about 7 years to get on the show, Mike and I, ever since we were kids, would watch The Amazing Race with our family. We remember those moments on the couch watching it and cheering on teams and just thinking how cool it would be for us to travel around the world together, being that we did everything together since we were little kids. So then when we finally quit our jobs together and ventured on this entrepreneurial path, we kind of came back to that idea of like, hey, maybe we can get on this show, The Amazing Race. So we sent in our first audition video, and believe it or not, we got noticed, and we were sent out to Los Angeles for finals casting. And Mike and I thought we had it in the bag, but unfortunately we weren't good enough that year. And we kind of got our hearts broken, but being the, I guess, resilient Brooklyn guys that we are, we were not going to give up on that dream. So year after year, we continued to send in another audition tape and another audition tape. And then finally, I think they couldn't take it anymore. And 7 years later, they finally let us on the show.
I love that you say resilient Brooklyn guys, because I always feel Brooklyn has come with me no matter where I've gone in my life. And there's just something to that. I think it's a special place to grow up. And I do appreciate that about you and your perseverance. So then you got on the show, and then it didn't go as well. Well, nothing ever goes perfectly well. So why don't you tell us, you have a series of videos, I'll tell this to our audience, that I recommend people watch later. And one of them starts off with 2 words in all caps, and the 2 words are pure torture. So start with that one. But, one of the videos that really did interest me, though, and I do want to start with this one, is about letting people trigger you. So can you tell us what you learned about people triggering you and what can be done about that?
Yeah, there's something we recently learned called the mirror rule. And the mirror rule says that most of the time, the things that are triggering you about someone else are just mirroring an insecurity that you have within yourself. And so anytime someone triggers you and you feel that anger start to boil up, a really interesting to do is try to shift towards curiosity instead of that anger, because chances are you'll learn something interesting about yourself in the process.
And what we tend to do is respond to that anger and act out of that anger, and that usually gets us in trouble. So having that awareness and that perspective shift to go within and ask, what about this situation is actually inside of me right now, is a really helpful exercise that we've...
And as brothers and business partners,
we trigger each other a lot.
We had to
know
use
all
this
the buttons
rule.
to press.
Exactly. We had to use this rule a lot. I'm trying to think of a specific example. I think one thing that comes to mind for me that Nick tells me a lot is I can be an angry elf, is what he calls me sometimes. He asks me if I'm angry at him or am I angry at myself? And a lot of times when I really stop in my tracks, I really think the relationship that I have with myself determines my relationship with other people. So it's just one of those self-awareness tools, one of many that we've learned over the years and have had to learn thanks to our time on The Amazing Race.
What you're saying is very important, and it's an ongoing journey because all of us get triggered by some universal things, right? We're all human, and some that are unique to us. And it's a constant battle to pause before acting. And that's exactly what led me to create Power Pairs, because working with teams for as long as I have, and working with myself as a person, I'm the only person I have direct access to. I just realized that pausing before we react is so critical, but pausing and then doing what, right? And that's part of what brought the two of you to me for this recent conversation about working together. And we'll get to that shortly. So tell me any other things about The Amazing Race that you feel would be important for people who are just, and most people are not on a reality show, they're just dealing with reality, but reality constantly throws things at us. So what do you recommend for people? What are some of the other experiences you had on The Amazing Race that taught you how to deal with reality?
So I'll start by saying what The Amazing Race is for people that don't know what it is. So it's basically teams of two travel across the country, across the world, and compete in challenges to win $1 million. And there's 14 teams on our season. At least there were 14 teams of two. Mike and I were one of those teams. And more than anything, it's really not a typical reality show. It's more a relationship show. It's about how can this relationship that has already existed, whether it be brothers or a mother and a son or whatever it may be, husband and wife, how can they be tested? How will they respond when they are tested to the stresses that come along the race? And trust me, there are many stresses that come along the race because you are sleep deprived, you're hungry, and then on top of that, you are going against a ticking clock because the last team to arrive at the mat gets eliminated. So with all of those stresses on top of you, and you're trying to accomplish a task together, it really does test you. And Mike and I were tested countless times right from the very first episode of The Amazing Race when we were in, where were we? Japan?
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong. We were in Hong Kong and we had to learn a dragon dance.
Lion dance.
I love that. I'll let the guy who's in the details tell the story. Go for it.
We showed up at the lion dance in first place. We were the first team to arrive. And we were up against the clock, like Nick said, because more and more teams were pouring into the location, and dancing is not our forte. So when we got there and saw it was a lion dance, we panicked a little bit. But the dance seemed simple enough. So I, being someone who likes to just jump in and just get stuff done, said, let's just try it. and we tried it and we failed, and we tried it and we failed, and we tried it and we failed. And now the frustration is mounting because every failure is just reinforcing this feeling like we can't do this.
There's one part you're leaving out, which is, so a part of this dance is that there's a front and a back person. And the person in the front really has the tough job of remembering many more steps than the person in the back. So being that Mike was more, had a better memory than I did, at least that's what we thought, we put Mike in the front. And Mike did have a great memory, but then what ended up happening was when we were getting those no's, it really started to frustrate Mike. And I started to see Mike's brain kind of fizzle out of control. And that's when I kind of stepped in with what I call my dyslexic advantage. And I started to say, Mike, okay, we need to take this big process and we really need to chunk it down into 3 big blocks. And then once I was able to communicate that effectively with Mike, and now instead of there being 10 different steps to this process, there was really just 3 major parts. And once Mike was able to kind of comprehend that, we were able to go in, accomplish the task, and make it to the mat before we got eliminated. So that was an interesting part, a way to start the race.
Can you show us the dance? No, I'm just kidding.
I never want to see that dance again.
Nick in the front. That's very interesting about chunking things into smaller pieces, though, and also that you defaulted to the role that you expected each of you to be. And part of your frustration, I would bet, is that you're when you said failing, you're trying and failing. Part of it is that you're failing in the expectation of that role because
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So you travel in pairs around the world. Where else did you go?
Hong Kong to Kyoto to Osaka to Bali. Both the beach and the forest in Bali, and then Dubai, and then we got eliminated in Bulgaria.
Yeah. So what happened to you in Bulgaria?
In Sofia, Bulgaria specifically, which Sophia, it means wisdom. So we got a lot of wisdom on that last leg of the race. What happened to us in Bulgaria? So a part of the show, there's this feature called a U-turn. Show us the dance. You could go watch it on Paramount Plus, and you could see us make a fool of ourselves there. But I think our dancing days are behind us, unless we get called back on the show, of course. But yeah, so we were in Bulgaria, and there's a part of the show where another team can U-turn you. And what that means is that instead of just doing one task, you have to do 2. So unfortunately, Mike and I got U-turned. So we had just finished the task. We're ready to move on. But then we got to a board. And so we were U-turned. So we had to go back to do another challenge. And the challenge we had to go back to was basically a needle in a haystack challenge. There were 3 large pyramids of hay. And inside one of those pyramids was a very teeny tiny bracelet that we had to find to get our next clue. Unfortunately, we were towards the back of the pack, so we felt the need to really rush through this so that we could not get eliminated here. And because of our lack of attention to detail, we had gotten to the bottom of these 3 piles of hay and had no bracelet. So now we were searching through all the hay that we had just laid out. And
long story short, we were searching for hay for 7 hours, and it took so long that the host actually had to leave his post to come and eliminate us. We were out there for so long in the blazing heat that the medics had to come and give us like electrolytes. We were cramping. It was really terrible.
Did you ever find that bracelet? Did they ever give it to you? Where's the bracelet?
No, they just, on TV when they show it, they'll like circle something underneath the hay, but I don't know. I don't know where
we never got the bracelet. The unfortunate
the bracelet right now. I think you guys did a great job, and there was no bracelet. And I'm sorry.
The really unfortunate part of this story was on that challenge that we had completed before this, we had to carry logs of wood, and Mike had a what do you call that thing that you were carrying the wood on?
Oh, like a wagon.
Mike had a wagon and I had a backpack that we had to put as much wood as we could on to get to deliver to this guy who had a scale, and we had to get 200 kilograms of wood. And Mike and I took one trip and we had 98.5 kilograms of wood. So we went back for another trip and we're like, we got this, one more trip. We just need a little extra wood and we could do this in two trips. We end up getting back for our second trip and we were off by 1 kilogram. So because of that, we had to go take a whole nother trip. And that was the reason why we got
those
U-turned.
few seconds cost us, because that allowed another team to U-turn us just seconds ahead of us. And so there was a lot of little things that added up that made this feel like destiny in a way.
Well, based on what you said a few minutes ago about the mirror rule and something triggering you, right? This is something that nobody really has control over. It's not that someone's triggering you, right? It's that circumstances are just a little too difficult to manage in this case. So is there a mirror rule for uncontrollable reality when it triggers you?
I don't know.
I know. We really subscribe to like the Stoic philosophy, which is like focus on what you can control and really forget the rest, because there are so many things that are outside of our control. And if we let those factors that are outside of our control really affect our mood, we'll just be miserable all the time, right? Because how many things are out of our control? Almost everything, right? Other than our attitude and how we respond to things. So I think the moral of the story is it's really not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters most in life. And at that moment in time, I thought we responded pretty gracefully. We were just standing in the sun for 7 hours. The host of the show was eliminating us and telling us we had to go home, but we stood there with our heads held high and we expressed gratitude for the opportunity to even be on the show. And I think that was us responding with grace.
Yeah, I think I want to just add on. I don't know about the mirror rule in this instance, but it does make me think of a formula that Ray Dalio shared in his book Principles, which is that growth equals pain plus reflection. And in that moment, we felt a lot of pain. It was like we let ourselves down. We let our family who was going to watch this down, and we had higher hopes for ourselves in the race. But the reflection was what we really needed. And looking back on that pain, it really brings to life the number one lesson we learned throughout our entire experience. And that lesson was to slow down, to enjoy the journey, to remove the pressure, to slow down and operate with more fun and presence. That was really the huge lesson that we learned from the entire show. Because if you reflect on all of our episodes, all 7 that we were on, it was rushing to the finish line and putting pressure on our own backs that caused us to make the silly mistakes, the small mistakes.
And some of those silly mistakes were not being able to communicate with each other effectively and understanding our roles, which brings us to power pairs, really, which was something that we wished we had before we went on the amazing race, because I think it would have helped us a whole lot more than what we did on the race in terms of our poor communication at times.
Well, thank you. And we'll get into that in a minute. I have a couple questions about what you guys just said, and then I'll lead into power pairs with it, because it really is a system I created partly, as you know, Nick, working with me when we did Culture Map, it's 7 color-coded hexagons that each have a different behavioral dynamic associated with them, created by the Culture Institute. And power pairs emerged from that work. After working with so many teams and color coding their culture map and looking at these dynamics and how much people, once you see the reality of being one thing and knowing that you want to be more of something else, people always ask what their own hexagons are. These 7 colored hexagons, each one, they want to know which one is theirs. And so I started really finding in myself, similar to what you were just describing, they each have a different pace associated with them. And when we talk about what you two, are in a moment, your anchors, it'll be more clear to the audience. But first, I want to focus on this idea of slowing down to speed up. because I would have to say that you came to that lesson because out of all the years I've been working with leadership teams and families and teams in general, the number one thing I often tell people is slow down to speed up. And it feels counterintuitive because we live in a world of, increasing seeming frictionlessness, right? Scrolling to the next thing, clicking away, walking away from anything that annoys us, instant gratification, wanting something right away. And it's just not reality. And so I'm struck by, the comments that both of you made, because I would ask you this, though. When you have the pain of frustration in the moment, right? Do you find that the two of you have different lengths of a tail afterwards? Like, Nick, you bounce back faster and you're like, well, I'm just happy to be alive, and like on to the next thing. And Mike, that pain kind of lingers a little bit more. I would ask you if that's true. And therefore, in the moment where one of you has let go and one of you hasn't let go yet, is there sort of a communication issue there? Or maybe, is it hard for you guys to empathize? I know there's a lot in that question, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean, and you were spot on in your assumption. I definitely take longer to process frustration. There is an interesting thing, though, that I've noticed, and that I process decisions and react like news, like new news coming into our business life. I can process a lot quicker, and a lot of times Nick has to really sit with the bigger decisions and like this new pieces of information, new opportunities, which is an interesting thing. But over time, I think we've learned to basically just let each other be and not try to force the other into, force a square into a circle or a circle into a square. But Power Pairs really gave us this shared language for understanding what makes each of us tick and what our anchors are, what we lean more towards, what we lean less towards, and helped us to really get clear on each other and how we can avoid all of those conflicts by understanding and accepting, more importantly than understanding, accepting each other and our strengths.
Mm-hmm. I'll share a little bit with our audience about what Power Pairs is. I have the box here that I created. So as I mentioned, it's based on 7 different colored hexagons. And so there's an assessment that lets you know which one of those hexagons is your anchor. And so there's also a box. And so if you look at the Power Pairs logo, it's 2 hexagons, right? One of them is your anchor, and then you're constantly pairing it with one of the other hexagons. And so for you two, it turns out that your hexagons are blue. Your anchor hexagons are blue and yellow. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what that meant for you, hearing that, and then what we did about it?
Yeah, that was a eureka moment for us. So the blue hexagon which is Mike, which is me, is very detail oriented, system and process oriented. Whereas the yellow hexagon is more of the quote unquote idea guy and
curiosity driven, a love of learning and exploring new ideas.
A love of learning just for the sheer sake of learning, which is something that is interesting. It turns out that in a way they're two opposites. Is that fair to say, Rita?
Well, I'm looking for both of your cards right now to show. I'll start with Methodical Learner. I may have taken your cards out when I was talking to you guys. So here you can see that's the yellow anchor, right? So it's a Methodical Learner, though. So it's paired yellow and blue, right? So at the end of the day, your blue anchor, as you described, you're process-driven, reliable, more methodical, right? Those are not mutually exclusive, right? So Nick loves to learn and is curious, and always one of the things I've loved about Nick, right? So, but it's a very challenging thing. There's a lot of counterintuitive kind of dynamics under the hood there, right? Because to me, process and curiosity are not mutually exclusive, and they often seem like they are. But when you're paired with someone, as the two of you are, it's easy for one person to be the idea person, and I've got this great idea, and maybe it is a great idea, but it still needs to be operationalized. And a lot of that work falls onto the person who's the blue structure person, right? So as you both have been describing, friction under the hood that any two human beings in the position that you're in, even though you're brothers and you've had all these experiences together, maybe because you're brothers and you've had all these experiences together, they're not mutually exclusive, right? So what we talked about when we started down the road with Power Pairs is, can you, Mike, take your blue anchor of reliability? And this is true for all of us, by the way. So those are 2 anchors, but there are 7, right? So we're just talking about their anchors right now. So that blue reliable anchor, can you then pair it with all 7 of the other hexagons as spotlights, I call them, right? Meaning they're more fleeting. Your anchor is the default dynamic that you tend to be most comfortable with as you move through navigating your world. But what led me to create Power Pairs was wondering, how broad is our behavioral range? Are we all capable of much greater range than we imagine might be? And I think the answer is yes. And so when you take the assessment, I can see, my team can see on the back end all 7 of your hexagons ranked. And so some of those other hexagons, right, they may not be your default anchor, but they are pretty familiar to you, pretty easy for you to put into practice, right? But all of us have one teeny tiny one that's our most loathed dynamic that we avoid, okay? And that's really our teacher, okay? That, going back to, pain can be your teacher, fear can be your teacher, the person who triggers you can be your teacher. That hexagon is your teacher as well, right? So in your case, you had the blue anchor, this reliability. Nick's case, yellow, curiosity, for the love of learning, which is the key here, right? Some people learn because they have to learn something, and some people learn because they love to learn. Well, the downside to loving to learn, I would say the limitation of that, which I share, by the way, is that there's an infinite amount of things to learn. And so how do you know when it's reached its limit in a particular context? And once it's reached its limit in that context, how do you know how to take your yellow anchor and pair it with something else so that you can move through a context? And so I'll pause on that idea for a moment and turn it back to you two to talk about what you did next with your anchors and what you learned from it.
Rather than talk about what we did, I almost want to talk about what we didn't do, which was fight. We have gotten into a lot of fights, and part of, the good thing about being brothers is that you can say anything. The bad part about being brothers is that you can say anything that you want to each other. And so I think a lot of times, because what was the word they used to describe, like the teeny tiny one that is your teacher? Is that what you said?
It's your smallest spotlight. So when you look at all 7 hexagons, it's the one that you just avoid the most.
Yeah. So the funny thing is that my teeny tiny was yellow and Nick's teeny tiny was blue, which is the complete opposite. So at first glance, that seems troublesome, but until you actually learn how to use them effectively and use those spotlights, it becomes actually the most complementary and beautiful, frictionless, and collaborative experience known to man.
Yeah, and instead of looking at it as, oh, that's a recipe for disaster, the way to reframe it is, wow, like I have someone who's an expert at this that can really teach me their ways so that I can take this thing that I'm really not that great at and become better at it. Yes. And vice versa.
I could give a specific example that actually just happened this week. So Nick is the idea guy. And a lot of times he can overwhelm me with ideas throughout the day. And especially when I'm like focused on trying to follow a process and a system, when I lock in, I really lock in. And so when there's too many ideas that are spit at me and like at one time, it frustrates me because that's not how my brain works. And it frustrates me. So I've taught Nick how my blue anchor works. And I've taught him that rather than just spit out your ideas to me as they come to you and as your yellow is just coming up with them on the spot, one thing that would be really helpful for me and for the team would be to really flesh them out on your own a little bit before presenting them to me. And this week, I told him, we had that conversation after our conversation, Rita. And this week, I was super proud of him. Not to sound like a father-son relationship, but I was super proud of him because he presented an idea to me. I forget what the specific idea was, but he really had thought it out, and he laid out like in his own way, a 1, 2, 3 blocked system. And he presented just one really well thought out idea. And I said, wow, that's a actually really amazing idea. And then I used my blue and figured out how we can implement this into the systems that we already have in place. And it was so much more effective than him saying, hey, Mike, in passing, what do you think about this? So that was just one example of how it reduced some friction and created
going off that same concept. Something that Mike and I have really struggled with in the past was basically Mike would write a draft of something, and then we would have a meeting to edit that thing together. And being that I am the idea guy, right? Like I'm constantly thinking about all these things live on the spot while we're editing it in a meeting together. I'd be throwing out, oh, maybe we should do this here. Maybe we should try that there. And it always ended up in an argument and a fight. And once we realized that, we basically set a rule for ourselves, which was, okay, we're not going to sit down together until both of us have had individual time to review the document and then come together and share those thoughts. And like Mike said, once we implemented that rule and I was able to take Mike's draft, write on the side, think about what was really important here, and then sit at the table and have the discussion, the ability to communicate and make decisions was just so much faster now.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No,
I just want to add one more thing because I'm getting excited. It's helped us a lot. So another thing that it's really helped us to do is to trust each other a lot more. So every Friday we stop. We have what's called a Friday stop, where we don't execute on any work. It's a day for us to reflect on the week that we just had and then plan for the following week. And it's a very structured day. Like in the beginning, we count our wins, then we do improvement opportunity. Like there's a structure to this day. And that day would sometimes be met with a lot of friction because that structure is really my thing. It's what I excel at, and making sure that we're keeping within that structure is what I'm best at. And Nick, in the past, before learning about power pairs and really trusting in our ability to lean on each other, would sometimes try to take that blue spotlight away from me rather than trust me to use mine, and almost see each other as complementary and one unit. So he was, rather than using his own blue spotlight for himself, he was using me, my blue anchor, as his spotlight. And once he trusted me to set the agenda and keep us on track, then we would have a block of time within that structure where it was just idea time. So it's like improvement opportunities. Nick, what do you got? Like, this is your time to let loose. How can we improve? Crazy ideas, any ideas, just spit them out. And so it was like putting a boundary for his creativity, which was the best thing that ever happened. So it's learning to trust each other and being able to like know when to lean on Nick's yellow and when to lean on Mike's blue.
This is all music to my ears, and I'm thrilled to hear you using the language of the colors, because the beauty of these colors is that it depersonalizes these dynamics. They're universal dynamics, and we're all trying to get things done together. And by depersonalizing them, it humanizes the relationship, which is very counterintuitive, right? But you no longer have to argue about the specific granularity, because you can just focus on what you just said about your taking away your blue spotlight. He now understands intuitively what that means in context. So you don't have to spend a lot of time explaining and maybe over explaining or even getting into a fight, because you both know what that means when you hear it. And similarly, putting constraints on creativity. I am a huge believer that creativity comes from constraints. If we have too many options, then nothing really gels. And so, Nick, I would ask you if fleshing out your idea and writing it down, first of all, did it help you eliminate other ideas that really didn't have legs, right? Things you would normally just kind of say, and then, oh, of course, we moved on past those ideas, but Mike may not know the difference in your mind between ideas that are meant to stick or not stick. So did that process help you weed out ideas that were not meant to stick and find the good one, like panning for gold?
Yeah, absolutely. And because I am such a visual person, by actually seeing the ideas, I could continue to build on them and iterate the ideas because I'm visually writing them down and seeing them versus verbally saying them to Mike and then not having a visual cue to kind of build off that idea. So it actually ended up being a better system for me to ideate because I was alone and visually kind of drawing things out and writing things out and able to kind of keep going down that line of editing the idea and making it better and changing it.
Years ago, I was invited to give keynotes to Amazon leadership, and it was about these 7 hexagons, actually. And one of the most interesting things that happened during the week I spent with them on a mountaintop in Washington State was learning about the documents they wrote prior to meetings. And you couldn't get senior executives in a room. I don't know if this is still true, but at the time, without really fleshing out your idea exactly the way you two just described. And so I interviewed 2 of the people who wrote a lot of these memos about what made a great memo and how do you use these, this writing. And I'm a big believer in, writing a lot and then editing it down. And writing is a process of thinking. It's easy to think of writing as putting words down, but really it's a process of clarifying your thinking. So I think it's a really incredible step. And, it's interesting with the 2 of you because I spent a lot of time earlier in my career working with families, telling family stories. I completely stumbled into this strange moonlighting gig of writing private stories for use in families so they could understand each other on a deeper level. And I did this for years, always thinking I'm certainly not going to do another one of these projects. And then word of mouth, it was like being in a TV show. The next person would come out of the woodwork and having heard about this and ask me to write another one. I wrote letters for people, essays, entire books, and really got to see the intimacy of the role of the individual in a family. And at the same time, I was a journalist working on huge systems, the nuclear industry, the government, regulatory agencies and corporations. And that's what led me to working with leadership teams at corporations. But it's always the role of the individual in a system that fascinates me. And that work with families was so critical. And so the fact that the 2 of you are brothers and I got to work with you, helping you grow your business by working on your relationship really means a lot to me because that's what gets me out of bed in the morning is helping people. We all have to do things. We have to work together, but it should be maximally enjoyable and as little friction as possible. And the friction we have should be creative and productive and lead us to be closer to each other. And so working with the 2 of you is, I love it for that reason. So thank you both for committing to the process.
Well, we want to thank you right back because working with you has changed our life in a big way. And one specific thing that I can think of to specifically thank you for is, as the person, we used to joke, and we don't joke about it anymore, that Nick's the idea guy and I'm the one who actually does the work. Like I do, he comes up with ideas and I do everything else. That was the joke that we used to have. And unknowingly, we were creating this discrepancy in the value that we bring to the business. And because I was the quote unquote doer and he was the quote unquote idea guy in terms of identity, which was really poor labeling, And now, because of that, I would grow very frustrated and feel like I'm the one carrying the weight of this business on my back. I'm the one that's, quote unquote, doing all the work. And I would turn to Nick and get frustrated and feel like there's some sort of imbalance here. And then it would come out in subtle ways. I'd be snippy with him, and it would come out in these really interesting ways where I would have an attitude, and it wouldn't really make sense, but it was all coming from that deeper place where I felt like things weren't fair. And it was because I was using these horrible labels where I'm the doer and he's the idea guy. And now that we have these new labels, which is my anchor is blue, his anchor is yellow, and each of those, like you said, it's not about, has nothing to do with who we are as people, but everything to do with who we are as people at the same time. It's just strengths and weaknesses. That's really all it is. And our strengths complement my strengths complement his weaknesses, his strengths complement my weaknesses. And when I was able to pivot to that perspective, it created so much more of a feeling of balance between ourselves. And I value what Nick brings to the table so much more. And I think he'll vouch for that.
I think it's really a shift in perspective of, oh, we're different, so that's not good, to we're different, and that's actually the best possible scenario here, because that's going to be 1 + 1 = 3 if we can actually work together effectively. And that is the shift that took place when we really dove deep into the hexagons and understood our colors, was that awareness that we actually are different. And that is a beautiful thing when we learn how to communicate more effectively together and work together better.
All of us are messy, and all of us have the capacity to learn, and the extent to which we commit to that capacity to learn. And both of you are just an incredible example of people who commit to that process. Tell us what about your business and what your goals are now.
So I'll start with, for the last 10 years, we've been running a nonprofit, an educational nonprofit with a mission to inspire a global movement of kindness. And what we do is we partner with schools across the country, and we send blankets to them, and they go through a kindness workshop where they write handwritten letters, attach them to their blankets, and then donate them to a local homeless shelter in their community. So every student makes a direct impact on an individual's life in their community. And really, this is all about experiential learning, right? Because we can stand in front of a classroom and tell kids why it's so important to be kind and all the benefits of it and all the stuff that gets unlocked in their brains and all that stuff. But really, if we give them this experience and let them feel it for themselves, we think that is the best thing we could do to start inspiring them to do more acts of kindness throughout their life. So that's one of our businesses that we've been running for the last 10 years. We kind of joke and say that business has now grown up and gone to college and taken a lot less of our time. And now we're kind of entering our second act, and I'll throw that over to Mike to talk about.
I wasn't ready for you to throw it over to me. Our second act is all about, if the first act was all about kindness, our second act is all about happiness and mental health. It's something that we're super passionate about. We feel like you mentioned in the very beginning of this conversation, life is starting to feel a little bit like a reality TV show, and there's a mental health epidemic happening between social media and just all the drama of this reality TV show is really affecting people. So we really want to meet people where they are, which is on social media. So we have a daily mental health podcast where every day in less than 10 minutes, we try to share an actionable idea to help you get your mind right for that day. We also have a weekly newsletter called Thank God It's Monday, where we do the same thing in less than 1 minute. We try to give you an idea to help you kick the week's ass, is what we like to say. That's pretty much
ultimately, we really want to use media as a force for good. We think that media, sometimes social media gets a bad rap, and rightfully so. Sometimes it really can be used for bad, but just like any tool that's ever been invented, whether it be the car or whatever, the airplane, whatever it is, it could be used for good or it could be used for bad. And it's all about how we as humans decide to use that tool. And we are actively trying to use the tool of social media to put out positive ideas that improve the quality of people's lives.
Well, I wish you all the best with that. And I am always rooting for the two of you and curious to see what comes next. So thank you for taking the time to have this conversation here today with me. I appreciate you both very much.
Thank you, Rita.
Feeling is mutual.
Thanks for joining Digital Dialogue. Look for more episodes at noon Eastern Time on most Tuesdays of every month. Can't join the live session? You can watch the replay anytime on our YouTube channel.